For those of you who don't know Pete is an author. He wrote a blog called Mr. Money Mustache. It took off internationally. It was a global hit and became super controversial because talking about frugality and money and culture in a way that you do really ignited a lot of people. So the FIRE movement somewhat started with you. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but can you introduce yourself and tell us just briefly why you're so controversial?
Yeah, I wouldn't frame it as controversy, but in real life, as you can see, I'm just a 49-year-old Longmont dad, and the only part that's unusual about me is on the internet. I am a guy who's known for having retired at 30, so almost 20 years ago, and I did this in order to, with my wife at the time, in order to raise a child, and I did it as a very, naive Canadian immigrant, thinking it was totally normal, because I moved here, got what I thought was a pretty good salary, lived what I thought was a pretty good life, saved the balance of the extra money, and then when we had enough, we quit and had a baby. And then when I started writing about this, then suddenly the fires of hell were unleashed, well, the fires of heaven as well, because it turned into this really good, interesting thing that I've been now writing about for 12 years, and now there's this whole FIRE movement thing going on, and lots of people are retiring early, quitting their jobs, doing whatever they want with their free time, and I think technically you are one of these FIRE people in a way too, if that's correct.
Thank you to you for that. If you look yourself up on LinkedIn, your title is a leisure engineer.
Yeah, that's true. I have another job, a newer job that's called owner/janitor at Mr. Money Mustache headquarters.
So when you're writing the blog and talking about your salary or like what you lived on a year to live in Longmont, do you remember that number?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because inflation exists, especially recently, but if you put it in today's dollars, I kind of just always lived on what might be about like $35,000 a year. And then even after getting married and have a child, we just have one child who's now a grown up, I just found that I couldn't really spend more money than that, even though I thought I was living a great life. And so my writing is about how can middle class Americans or even higher spending Americans just buckle down a little bit and live on roughly like half of what the average person with their appearance of lifestyle is, and you don't really have to make compromises. But what happens when you have cut your spending in half, well, suddenly you can save that other half and invest it in super boring index funds, and surprise, you can retire about 30 years earlier than normal.
It's amazing. It might be news to people, and you might have huge fans in the audience, but I think everybody's heard of FIRE at this point. It seems to come up in the newspapers every couple months. Financial independence, early retirement.
Yeah, retire early if you want
early.
Have it in order.
You didn't come up with the phrase, but I think you're credited with popularizing it.
Yeah, and I'm honored with that. It's probably not true, but I'll take it. I'm like the grandfather of the FIRE movement, some people say, but I like to be like the bossy older brother because I'm clinging to my youth a little bit. But I'm really happy because there's thousands of people writing about this in like YouTube channels and podcasts, and there's something called Choose FI that I think is bigger than Mr. Money Mustache ever was. And I'm happy because it's just spreading this basic idea of, hey, consumption is not everything in our lives, and if you reevaluate like what you think you want, align with like what human nature and happiness really is based upon, then suddenly you realize you can spend a lot less money and still also have a better life than you currently have.
How, in actuality, how does early retirement work? And do you think everybody in this room could actually achieve that?
Yeah, well, I mean, depends on, I don't know everybody's exact situation, but the real magic behind this whole deal is that if you can figure out how much money you spend per year and write that number down, you might have to add up your credit cards or whatever, and then multiply that by 25, that's the amount of money you need to retire. So as soon as you get that, then you basically never have to work again, like with a very approximate rules. So if you can live on $40,000 a year, if you can somehow amass $1 million of investments, then you're set for life. And if you need more spending, of course, you might have to double that or even more. So that's why I focus so much on the spending, because most people can't just double their income, but a lot of people can actually have their spending, even though it might sound a little counterintuitive if you've never looked into the stuff that I write about.
I love how you phrase it. It's very much do it the hard way, do it the way that maximizes your life while doing it. I've done some projects with you at my home. I've done some projects out of the headquarters. Do you think the movement, I mean, it's often typecast as just being for tech bros or high earners. Do you think it's that way?
Yeah, well, there's actually a reason I kind of write my articles towards higher income people, which is probably us as tech workers and many of the people here in Boulder. And that's because I kind of have a secret mission, which is to reduce the spending of rich people, because we're the ones who do all the consuming of like natural resources. But I try not to say that out loud because people want the freedom and the carrot, but they don't want the stick of like, an eco hippie kind of beating them down and saying don't spend so much and don't consume so much. But the funny part is it actually makes an even bigger difference the lower your income is, right? Because if you're just scraping by, stressed about car payments and credit card bills, then figuring out how to lower your spending is going to make a way bigger difference in your life and your ability to like be with your kids and not get kicked out of your apartment. So I like to think it's for everybody, but the reason I include the rich people is because there's like the secret environmental mission as well.
The biggest feedback I often hear is, I would do that, but I would be bored without my job.
Yeah, and if that's true, then congratulations, because it means you have a good job. Most people are not in that situation. Like when you look at survey after survey, almost everybody in this country and the other developed countries is pretty dissatisfied with their job. And if they didn't have to do it for the money, they would probably at least change it substantially, or maybe they'd quit entirely and do an entirely different job. So yeah, I'm not telling people they're going to quit doing anything. I'm just saying if you step back from the financial cliff a little bit and your choices open up, you'll probably have a lot more interesting and happy life. And you and I both do a lot of work. We're currently doing a TED Talk, which took some work, and even though we could be retired.
And I'd like to point out that you chose to do the interview over the memorized speech because you're a leisure engineer.
Yeah, I did do a prepared speech once. Much respect to all the real speakers here, and I was just so stressed out for months in advance with all like the preparation and everything. I'm like, I'm too retired for this. And I don't have a career or a platform to sell or books to sell or whatever. So, in a way, like it's okay if I'm not as prestigious. I just want to be me.
So I read about you online, and it's funny because I know you, and then I'll read stories about you. And man, people have opinions about you, and they love tearing you down, and I love seeing you in the comments section because you'll go toe-to-toe with them and be the nicest human I've ever met. Why do you think there's that disconnect?
Yeah, I never quite figured that out because I thought I was being nice to begin with, and then people thought I was, judging their lifestyle, which I kind of am, but people just don't like seeing something that's different than their lifestyle. Like they immediately feel challenged, and it's true in politics. And I've actually learned to be a bit more diplomatic in recent years, and I think I get a little bit less hate. But at the same time, it's fun to be provocative and use some like swear words and everything in my language, and just because that's fun for me. It wouldn't be fun for me if I was trying to be Mr. Polite, like CNN News financial guy. And thank goodness I was able to do that. I think that's partly why it spread, is because it was more interesting than a mild-mannered, normal financial advice.
What was the title of the Washington Post article? Was it Washington Post?
There was a New Yorker article that I felt was kind of a hit piece like quite a few years ago, and they called it The Scold. And it was just about me scolding everybody and like penny pinching and telling them they couldn't do anything. And when you read it in detail, it actually is just normal life, but the guy really wanted to portray me as like Mr. Dictator. And it actually like hurt my later dating life because someone read that and they're like, I don't think we're a good match. It's really, you pay a price for being in the public eye, but there's some benefits too.
So your blog has been read by millions and millions of people. Most people that want to give a TEDx talk or a TED talk want to have their idea go out and change the world. You're in a unique position of starting the blog and having your words read by million and your ideas actually spread to action. What are you most proud of in that?
I think for me, my favorite part is getting personal feedback from people. Like someone will come up to me at a meetup and say, I want to shake your hand and just tell you a story that I became a super dad because I read your stuff years ago and I was able to reduce or quit my job, in order to spend more time with my kids. Or I get emails that say the same thing, and it's just really happy to see that this stuff actually works for some people besides just me. And I happen to be kind of dad focused, and not everybody's interested in the family, but I think everybody becomes a better person if they're not like just on the edge, trying to find their next paycheck or trying to find their next $1 million, like with insatiable desire. So if my writing can contribute to like just a feeling of satisfaction with what you have and getting more out of what you have, and people behave more ethically because of that, then that's like the best paycheck I could ever get.
Everybody give it up for Pete Adeney.